Hello. As you can see, the next game I'm going to talk about is Horrified. It's October, so I'm just, kind of trying to do a couple of horror Halloween themed games. I did a couple last week, I think, or at least one. Anyway, I'm going to do Horrified. I know there's a newer edition that came out this year called Horrified American Monsters or something like that. I don't have that one. This is the one that came out a couple of years ago, 2019, I think. And that's actually the last time I played it, so it's been about 2 years since the last time I played it. But I did actually play it today to refresh myself on the rules, so I could go over a setup and how to play. So let's get started. As usual in setup, the first thing you'll do is place the board on the table in between all the players. Then you'll take the terror marker and place it on the 0 space of the terror track. And you'll find the villagers. There should be 10 villagers that look like this. And you'll place them somewhere near the top of the board or somewhere where they're within easy reach, along with the 3 dice. Then you'll take the monster cards, which have this black back with white footprints, shuffle those, and place them somewhere within reach next to the board. Then you'll choose which monsters you want to play with according to what difficulty that you want to play. As you can see, for a novice game, any 2 monsters, standard game, any 3, challenging game, any 4, and for your first game, it just says use the black creature from the Black Lagoon and Dracula, so that's what we'll do. So then you find the monster mats for the monsters you're going to play with in your game and lay them out in frenzy order with the lowest. This is the frenzy number here. So from lowest to highest, since we're playing with 2 monsters, it's just these 2. So they start with Dracula and then the next is Creature from the Black Lagoon. The other possible monsters in this game are Frankenstein and the Bride, the Mummy, the Wolfman, and the Invisible Man. And you can use the back of any of these to see how to set up for the monsters you're using, and that's the next thing we do. So we're using Creature for the Black Lagoon, so it says we place the camp overlay on the board so it aligns with the camp location. This is the camp overlay, so we put it on top of the camp location. And next it says place the creature on the board at the lagoon. This is the lagoon. So you find the creature's figure and place it there. And finally place the boat on the X labeled start on the monster mat. This is the boat figure for the creature from the Black Lagoon, and if you look on his mat, there's the X labeled start. So that's all the setup for the creature. Now we move on to Dracula. Place Dracula on the board at the crypt. Here's the Dracula figure. Here's the crypt, so we just place him there. And then place a coffin with the red icon face up on each of the following locations. So these are the coffins and the red icon facing up, so we need to put one at the crypt, dungeon, graveyard, and cave. So remember, Dracula starts at the crypt. We put one in the crypt, put one in the graveyard, put one in the dungeon, and finally one in the cave. And that's all the setup instructions for Creature and Dracula, so then we can just put these back in the box. Then we take the frenzy marker, which is this marker, and place it on the monster in play that has the lowest frenzy level, which is Dracula with a level of 1. So we'll place the frenzy marker on him. Then it says to shuffle and mix up the hero badges and deal 1 to each player, and that will be the player they're going to use for that game. In the back of the rule book it does say for a more strategic game the players can choose which players they want to be and who's going to be first player, but for your first game and just for the more random setup, it says to shuffle them and deal 1 to each player, which that's what I'm going to do. And then the first player will be the player that last ate garlic. So for me, my first player is just always going to be the player over here on the left side. So let me shuffle those up and deal 1 random face down. So I got the mayor, and so she gets her corresponding mover. I got the inspector, and gets their corresponding mover. And I got the archaeologist, who gets their corresponding mover. Then you also give each player a reference card that shows what to do on the hero turn and the monster turn, or hero phase and monster phase. I'm just going to put 1 out since I'm playing solo, but normally you would deal 1 of those to each player. Then each player will place their hero mover at the starting location indicated on their badge. So the mayor starts at the theater. So she'll put her figure there. The inspector's starting location is the precinct. So they'll put their figure there. And finally, the archaeologist's starting location is the docks. So he will put his figure there. You'll shuffle up the deck of perk cards, deal 1 to each player, face up, and then the remaining perk cards just go in a deck somewhere near the game board, within reach of players. You'll take all the item tokens, which look like this, and place them in the bag, mix them up, and then draw out 12 and put them at the locations where they say they go on the board. So for example, we draw out 1. We got this experiment which goes in the laboratory, so it would go here. Draw another one. We got the bear trap which goes in the shop, which is here. So I'm going to go ahead and do that for all 12. Alright. I got out all 12. I got 1 here in the graveyard, 1 here in the institute, a couple in the laboratory, a couple in the shop, 3 up here at the camp, 1 here at the inn, 1 here in the tower, and I think that's it. Now the red items represent physical items, the blue items represent intellectual items, and the yellow items represent spiritual items. And that's it. The game is set up, and now you're ready to play. So let's talk about how you play. So the game is cooperative. The players will work together to try to defeat whichever monsters are in play. And the monsters will each have an individual way in which they can be defeated. So for instance, the creature, you've got to find his hidden lair and then drive him away, whereas Dracula, you've got to find and smash all 4 of his coffins and then overcome Dracula. So a player's turn is in 2 phases. You have the hero phase and then the monster phase, and then it switches to the next player turn and they'll have a hero phase and a monster phase and so forth. And keep going round till either the monsters win or the heroes win. Now the heroes win if they defeat all the monsters in play, and we'll talk a little bit more about how you defeat these particular monsters, but again, it depends on the monsters that are in play how you defeat them. But the monsters always win if the terror track reaches this space, then the monsters win, or if you have to draw a card from the monster deck and there's no cards left to draw, then the monsters win. So on a hero's turn during the hero phase, they can take up to a number of actions that it shows on their badge here. So the mayor can take up to 5 actions, the inspector can take 4 actions, and the archaeologist can take 4 actions. So let's talk about what the actions possibly are. Well, one action is to move to an adjacent space. So an adjacent space is to move along one of these lit or lighted paths. So you know, this could be 1, 2, that would be 2 of your actions, or 1, 2, that would be 2 of your actions. So just depending on how many movement spaces you want to move, they each take one action. Now, these river spaces and water spaces can only be used by the creature. So any of the other monsters and the players and villagers have to move along these lighted spaces. They can't move in these water spaces and water paths. So another action you can do is guide. So if there's a villager on the board, you can do a guide action. And with a guide action, you can either move a villager that's in your hero space to an adjacent space, or move a villager from an adjacent space to your space. Now, if you are ever in a space with a villager and you're taking a move action, you can automatically move the villager with you when you move. It doesn't cost any extra action. So if you wanted to take this villager with you and move to the barn, that's still just one action. But a guide action lets you move a villager, as I said, from an adjacent space to your space. Or if you don't want to move, you can move the villager from your space to an adjacent space. That's the guide action. So let's talk a little bit more about villagers. They'll be placed on the board by monster cards, and we'll get to those when we talk about the monster phase. But the card will say where to place the villager when they get placed on the board, and then they have a location that they want to get to. So for instance, Wilbur and Chick here want to get to the dungeon. So depending on, like I said, the card will say where they get placed on the board, but then they want to get to the dungeon. So if you, by moving the villager with you or using your guide action, ever get this villager to where they want to go the dungeon, then they go off the board and you get to draw a perk card. Remember, each player started the game with a perk card, one perk card each. But if you ever get a villager to the location they want to go, then you get to draw a perk card. Now, perk cards can be used at any time during the hero phase. So even in another hero's turn during their hero phase, you can play your perk card. So for instance, this one, you can, if you play it, move each monster up to 2 spaces. This person's perk card, skip the next monster phase, draw and place 2 items from the bag. And his is the current player takes 2 additional actions. So again, remember, these can even be played on another player's turn, but only during the hero phase, not during the monster phase. And once they're played, they go into a discard pile. So another possible action you can take is your special action. Now, some players, like the mayor here, doesn't have a special action, but this player has a special action of place your hero in any non-water space with a monster, and the archaeologist has pick up items from an adjacent space. So then again, you can do that as one of your actions, and any of these actions you can do any number of times, just up to your total number of actions. So she could do her special action 4 times if she wanted, or move twice and do her special action twice, or move. Anyway, you can do up to this number of actions, and one of your possible actions, if you have one, is a special action. Another action you can do is pick up. So if your character is in a space where there are item tokens, you can use the pick up action to pick up any number of items that are in that space, and then you just put them in your area next to your player. Alright, another possible action you can do is share. So when you do the share action, any players in the same space as you can freely exchange items between each other. So they don't even, if it's your turn and you do the share action, say it's the mayor's turn and she does the share action, the other 2 players, since they're in the same space, they can exchange items amongst themselves and not even exchange something with you. So any players in the space of the player that takes the share action can exchange items, and it doesn't have to be a 1-for-1 exchange. One person could give somebody 3 items and not get any. So they're just allowed to share amongst anybody in that space any items they want, however they want to share them. Alright, another action you can take is the advanced action, and that's working toward defeating a monster. So before you can do the defeat action on a monster, you have to have completed all the advance actions. So for Dracula, if you want to do an advance action, it says in a space with a coffin, use any number of red items with at least a power equal of 6 or more. Or I think that's actually called the strength. So you'll notice items have a number at the top, and that's their strength. So if you're in a space with one of Dracula's coffins, so for instance, if the inspector here was in the cave and had picked up this silver cane from the shop, she could do an advance action and spend any number of red items that have at least a power of at least strength of at least 6 or more and smash the coffin. So then she could smash the coffin by taking it off the board. I remember she was in the cave, so she puts the smash side up on the cave, and then that advanced action is done. So to defeat Dracula, all 4 of his coffins have to be smashed that are distributed around the board. So again, an advance action for Dracula would be to be in a space with one of his coffins and spend tokens worth up to at least 6 strength. When you spend them, they just kind of go into a token discard pile. They don't immediately go back in the bag. And this just happened to be a strength of 6, but if she had 2 red tokens that were, a total of 4 and a 2, she could spend both of those to equal the 6 strength and smash the coffin. And for the creature, for an advance, when you use an advance action, you have to be at the camp, which is here. And then you can spend, for an advance action, you can spend either a yellow or red or blue token or item and move the boat to the next X that matches that color. So if the inspector was here and spent an action to pick up all 3 of these items, then she could spend another action to do an advance action and maybe spend a blue item, and then she could move the boat all the way to the blue eggs. Now then she would have to spend, you can only spend 1 item at a time, so she would have to spend another action then to spend a yellow, and then she could move the boat all the way to the yellow eggs. Once somebody finally has done enough advanced actions where the boat gets to the lair, then all the advanced actions for the creature is done. And that brings us to the final type of action you can do, and that's the defeat. So once all the advance actions are done on a creature, you can take in a defeat action on it. So to defeat Dracula, you would have to be in the same space with him and then spend at least 6 power worth of yellow tokens. And if that happens, then you defeat him and he comes off the board and he's no longer part of the game. To defeat the creature, once all his advance actions done as the boat is moved to his lair, as long as the boat is still in the lair, because it is possible, he has this power when he attacks where if he rolls that, you can move the boat back 1 space. But if the boat is in the lair, you can do a defeat action by being in the same space as the creature and spend a yellow and a red and a blue item, and if you do that, then you defeat him and you defeat the creature. So if both monsters get defeated before one of the conditions that we talked about, either the terror level reaching 7 there, or the last monster card being no more monster cards to draw, then the players win. And again, the advance actions and defeat actions are different for the other monsters. So, once a player has taken all of their actions, so again, like the mayor can take 5 actions, 5 of the 5 actions that I just talked about, you can do different ones or the same one multiple times, however you want to do it. After a player has finished the hero phase and finished their actions, then you go to the monster phase. And in that, the player will draw a monster card. And the first thing they'll see is a number up here. Now this one is 0, but sometime let's find another one. So it's 3. So in that case, first thing you do is draw 3 items out of the item bag and place them on the board where they say they go. The next thing you'll do is the event. So on this card, it says place Fritz at the tower. Well, if it has that icon there, Fritz is a villager. So you would find Fritz amongst the villagers. Here he is. And place him at the tower, which is here. And as you can see, where he wants to go is the Institute. But he would start at the tower. And then finally, after you do the event, now some events may affect a monster, like this one affects the mummy. If an event would affect a monster that's not in play, like in this case, this mummy event doesn't have anything to do with Dracula or the creature, the mummy's not in play, so you would just ignore that event. And finally, the last thing you look at is the monster strike. The monster strike icons down here, so it'll tell you which monster is going to be affected, or in this case monsters, and then it'll tell you how many spaces they can move and how many attack dice they would roll if they were going to attack. So in this case, this would be the Frankenstein monster. He's not in the game, so you would ignore that. This is the bride monster. She's not in the board, or in the game, so you would ignore that. But then the frenzied monster would go. So the current frenzied monster is Dracula. Since Dracula is the frenzied player and he's going to move 1 space towards the nearest villager or hero, taking precedence over heroes, this villager is 1, 2, 3 spaces away, but the mayor is also 3 spaces away. Now in this case it doesn't matter, because moving 1 space toward the nearest still is going to move them to the same spot. But when they move, they always move toward the nearest hero or villager. If it's an equal amount of spaces between a hero or villager, they'll always choose the hero over the villager. And if it's an equal amount of spaces to the nearest 2 heroes, then the current player gets to decide which one it'll move toward. And then finally, if the movement would take the monster into a space with a hero or villager, then it gets to roll 2 attack dice. Now, if both a hero and a villager are in a space that the monster's in and it's going to attack, it will always choose to attack the hero over the villager. If there's 2 heroes in the same space, then the current player gets to decide which hero is going to be attacked. And when the monster attacks again, like in this case, says rolls 2 dice. So he would take 2 dice and roll. And if you get this icon, you do the monster's special ability, which here is Dark Charm. Place the current player's hero in Dracula's spot. So you would move the current player's hero to this whatever spot Dracula is in. Then he also got a hit icon. So in this example, since there's 2 heroes in there, the current player would get to decide which hero gets hit. Now, when you get a hit, 1 hit will kill a hero or villager. But if you've picked up items and you get a hit, you can discard an item to block a hit. So if this player was hit once, he could just discard this item and block it, or if the monster rolled 2 hits, he could discard both these items to block both of the hits. But if you can't block a hit or don't want to block a hit because you don't want to lose your items, just 1 hit will defeat you. So if you get defeated, you move the terror icon up one, and then you take your player off of the board and move it into your play area. At the beginning of your next turn, you'll put your player on the hospital and just take all your actions from there. If the monster gets a hit on a villager, then they have no items to discard. The villager is just defeated, and the terror icon or terror tracker moves up one. So that ends the monster phase. So you then just put that card in a discard pile, and then it goes to the next player to your left, who then begins with their hero phase, and they do all their actions, and then they'll draw a card for the monster phase. And it may be sometime that the monster card doesn't affect any monster that's out, so the monster won't move, or none of the monsters may move or attack that round. Usually it's either going to have a monster icon that's on the board or the frenzy marker, which there's always a monster with a frenzy marker on the board. The frenzy marker, as I said, it starts on the lowest monster with the lowest frenzy value, but some event cards will move it, and when it moves, it just moves up to the next monster with the next highest frenzy value. If it's already on the highest and it moves, then it moves back to the lowest. If a monster is defeated, like if Dracula is defeated, then the frenzy marker would just move to the creature, the person with the next highest value frenzy. So that's pretty much how you play the game. As I said, you keep playing until either all the players are able to defeat all the monsters, or until the terror track reaches the top marker, or there's no more monster cards to draw and you need to draw one. The game doesn't end when the last monster card is drawn. You still get to take that turn, but or the next player still gets to take their hero turn in case you're able to defeat the monsters on that turn. But if then that player has to move to the monster phase and draw a monster card and they can't, then the game ends, if you haven't defeated the monsters by then. So that's it. Not a whole lot to it. Some of the creatures and monsters have a little bit more difficulty to them, but not too much. So let's go ahead and go through a few example turns. Alright, I think I got the board all reset. We'll say that Mayor is the first player, so she gets 5 actions. Again, she starts in the theater. So players will decide maybe, hey, why don't you guys go after Dracula, I'll go after Creature for the Black Lagoon. I guess players will discuss amongst each other. So we'll say she decides maybe she wants to go after Creature for the Black Lagoon. So she's going to, remember, she gets 5 actions, so she's going to move 1, 2, 3. That's 3 of her actions. For her 4th action, she's going to pick up both of these items, just puts them in her area. She still has 1 action, and she also, could use this card to move monsters, but she doesn't want to do that. So she moved 1, 2, 3. That's 3 actions. Pickup was her 4th action. For her 5th action, she'll move to the shop. Now, also, the other players during the hero phase could use their perk card. So this player could decide to go ahead and play this now and skip the next monster phase, or this player could let the current player take 2 additional actions, but for right now they're not going to do that. So that's going to end the hero phase for the mayor. So now she goes to the monster phase, so she'll draw a card. Alright, first thing, she's got to draw 3 items out and put them on the board. So she drew a pistol, that goes in the precinct. She draws a tablet, that goes in the museum. And finally, she draws a torch, and that goes in the barn. Alright, next is the event, which places Maleva at the camp. So you find the villager, Maleva, that's her, and she starts at the camp. Now she wants to get to the shop, but she starts at the camp. She's kind of vulnerable to the creature right now, so that's not very good. And then finally, look at the monster strike line. We have the Wolfman. He's not in the game, but we do have the frenzied monster, which is Dracula, so he gets to move one toward the nearest player, which is looks like it's going to be there, but just moving one, that's the only place he can move anyway. Now, when you're using the creature, because they can move along these water paths and water spaces, you have to take those into the count when you're going toward the nearest person. But that's it. He can only move one space, and so there's not going to be an attack. So we just discard that card, and now we go to the next player to the left, which is going to be the Archaeologist. So he gets 4 actions. So we'll say he's going to move here, pick up this for 1 action. That's 2 of his actions. Then he's going to move here for 3 actions, and for his 4th action, he's going to use his special action, which is pick up an item from an adjacent space. So this, where he's at now, is adjacent to the barn, so he's going to pick up this torch and put that in his area. So that's his 4 actions. Again, he could take an additional 2 actions if he wanted to play this card. No, he's not going to do that yet. So he's done. So now he go to the monster phase. So he draws a card. He's got to put out 2 items. So let's see. He draws a stake that goes in the Abbey, which is over here by where Dracula is. And he draws a what is that? Canopic jar, and that goes in the museum. Now, one thing I didn't mention is monsters do not hinder movement. If you move into a space with a monster, or just because you're in a space with a monster, it's not going to attack you, and you can move through a space with a monster, no problem. The only time a monster will attack you is if the monster strike line says it was. But anyway, we put out our 2 items. Now we look at the event that affects the Wolfman. He's not in the game, so we go down here. Alright, the first creature to activate is going to be the creature from the Black Lagoon. That's his icon. He can move 1 space and attack with 2 dice. So he's going to move 1 space toward the nearest person, which is actually that villager. So he can move along the waterways, so he's going to move there. Now he could have gone there. Either way, it would be the same distance. But still, he doesn't roll an attack because he's not. So then Dracula's going to move. So he'll move 1 space toward the nearest person, which it's 1, 2, 3 to the villager, and 1, 2, 3 toward the hero. They always go toward the hero, but in this case, it's not going to matter anyway because 1 space is all he can move, so he can only go 1 place. So he can't attack again. But again, now the frenzy creature goes, which is still Dracula, so he gets to go again. So he'll move 1 space towards the mayor here, so he will move down here. But again, he's still not in the space where he can attack, so that's going to be all we do with that card. So now we discard it. And we come to the inspector, who should have no items because we reset the game. So actually both of these should be in the shop, which that'll be good. That'll help the mayor. I forgot to reset those when I went back to doing my turn example. So we come to the inspector. She has 4 actions. The first action she's going to do is pick up this pistol. That's 1 action. Then she's going to, let's see. Then she's going to move 2, 3, 4 and move in here with the villager to maybe help protect that villager from getting killed. Now I think she's going to play this. Skip the next monster phase and draw and place 2 items in the bag. So she's going to play that. So she won't have to draw a monster card, and she draws and places 2 items out. So she got this that goes in the mansion, and this knife that goes in the docks. Now again, she skips her monster phase, so now we just go on to the mayor. So the mayor has 5 actions. For 1 action, she's going to pick up both of these items. Just remember, here she's at the shop. That's one action. Then she's going to move 2, 3, 4. And with her 5th action, she's going to do an advance. So she's going to spend 1. She's here where there's a coffin. So she has to spend at least 6 power worth of red icons. So she's going to discard a 6 power red icon. And that allows her to take the coffin out of the graveyard and put it here on the mat. And so that's 1 coffin down, 3 to go before they can try to defeat Dracula. And that was her 5th action, so she doesn't have any more actions. But we'll just say Archaeologist wants to go ahead and play his card and give the current player 2 additional actions. So the mayor will get 2 more actions. So for one of them, she's going to pick up this shovel. And for her next action, she'll move 1 space here to the church. Now that's the end of her turn, unless she wants to play her perk card. But she's not, so now she goes to the monster phase, so she draws a card. We don't put any new items out. This affects the mummy, so the event doesn't fire. Wolfman's not in the game. Dracula is in the game, so he'll move 1 space, which he's going to move toward the mayor. And then he gets to attack her with 2 dice. So he'll roll 2 dice. Oh, 2 blanks. That's pretty lucky for the mayor. If she had been hit, she's got 4 items, she could have defended herself with by discarding them. So she probably would have been okay. But then the next is the Invisible Man. He's not in the game, so we discard that. And now we go to the Archaeologist's turn. He's got 4 actions, so we'll say he's going to move 1. For his second action, he's going to use his special power, pick up an item from an adjacent space. So 2, he'll pick up that item. For his third action, he's going to move here to the dungeon. And for his fourth action, he's going to do an advance action because there's a coffin there. So he's going to discard these 2 items, which totals 8. He has to total at least 6. And that lets him smash this coffin in the dungeon and put it there. So now he's done. Now he's got to draw a card, monster card. He's got to put out 2 items. So he drew a tarot deck that goes in the camp, and he drew a kite which goes in the tower. Alright, then the thief, the Invisible Man's not in the game, so that doesn't fire. So then we have the mummy's not in the game, but the creature is, so the creature will move 1 and attack with 3 dice. So he's going to move 1 into here. Now there's both a villager and a hero in there, so it'll always attack the hero over the villager. So he gets to roll 3 dice. And he got 2 hits. So the inspector could discard 1 item and block 1 hit, but she would still get hit with the other one, and it only takes 1 hit to kill you. So she's not going to bother wasting discarding that item. She'll just go ahead, take the hit. She'll be killed or defeated, so she comes off the board. Again, at the beginning of her next turn, she'd start in the hospital. But we do move 1 up on the terror track because the player was defeated. Remember, you move up when a villager is defeated or when a hero is defeated. So then next would be the Frankenstein monster. He's not in the game, so we discard that. So then we come back to the mayor. So I don't know, I think you pretty much see how the game works. We didn't show exactly how, but if, say, the inspector hadn't got defeated here and on her turn she wanted to do an advanced action for the creature, well, first she would probably do a pickup, so she would pick up all these items. That would be one of her actions. Then for her next action, she'd want to do an advanced action since she's at the camp. To move the furthest, she would want to discard a blue or item, so she would do an advanced action with this blue item. That would move the boat up to the blue. That would only be in 2 of her actions, so she could still do 2 more. So to move furthest again, she would discard a yellow item, which would move the boat down to the yellow X, leaving her with still one more action left. And so she'd probably want to discard another yellow to move the boat the furthest, so she would discard another yellow item, and that would move the boat to that X. Then she would be out of actions. But again, you can see you want to move the boat to the lair, and then you can try to defeat the creature, and you want to destroy these coffins, and then you can try to defeat Dracula. So I think that'd give you a pretty good idea of how the game plays. It's a fun game. It's usually pretty quick. I think I've only played it a total of 4 times. Today was the first time since 2019. But I enjoy it. I think my family probably doesn't enjoy it as much as I do. I don't I don't know why, but it's a good fun game, and it's not long. Good kind of family, quick, cooperative game. It's not easy. Even with these 2 easiest monsters, when I played it earlier today, I got close to winning. I defeated Dracula and had the boat at the lair and was just trying to get to the creature, but I ended up getting up to 7 on the terror track and losing. So anyway, that's it. Hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching.